Okay, to finish up, I'm just going to do a quick overview of the electrical layout in here, and I hope it's not too confusing to follow, but I'm just going to go through it sort of as a 360 around the shop. So starting off in our corner here, we have our lights and our outside light. I found an old explosion-proof switch that I've got set up here for the light, and no reason, there's no specific reason for it other than I just think it looks cool, and I just want to incorporate a couple little things like that around here. Down here I ended up using a BX double clamp. So I have power first coming into the outside light box. I have a switch lead going to the outside light. The constant power coming down feeding the main lights here. For the main lights I decided to run them in a conduit, and I went with moisture proof light fixtures. They don't have to be moisture proof, but I like the look of them. I like the robust industrial, almost an Art Deco feel to them. And the other thing is I wanted a cage or some sort of protection around the bulbs. These are high quality bulb. The color is pretty good, and they're about 25 bucks a piece, and I just did not want to be whacking them off. I've already hit these things half a dozen times, a couple times quite hard, and they've stood up just fine, no issues, so I think they were a good investment. Down here we have our fin, and fin is the only thing in the shop that runs off of 600 volts 3-phase. Even that is not enough sometimes, but that's all we got to give him, so I think he creates his own energy, to be honest. The next thing we have is our main panel, and coming out from our panel and down we have a baseboard heater. The heater is size small on purpose. I want to keep my electrical usage down. The heater is supplemental heat during the spring and fall and summer. It has no problems keeping everything warm enough. And on the colder days and in the winter, the pellet stove takes over. The gray box on the very bottom and the white box with the LED in it is the internet system. That's on its own circuit. I've found in the past that sharing circuits with the internet can cause disruptions, and so just keeping it on its own circuit seems to really help eliminate some of the problems and frustrations. Then on the next circuit we have a couple 110 volt plugs. Their main purpose is to feed the miter saw. Hooked up into one of the plugs is an IVAC automatic vacuum switch, and that simply just switches the vacuum on every time the miter saw is used. One thing that I enjoy about the IVAC system is that it has a couple of extra parameters. One of them is that it is set up to run a few seconds extra once the power is cut off to the power tool. So once you let off the trigger on the miter saw, the vacuum will still run for a few seconds just to clean everything out of the hose. This particular box has been with me now for probably about 8 years, and no issues with it. I have had another one that I did have an issue, and I'm not sure whether it was the vacuum plug fault or if it was the box, but I had one of the receptacles started melting down, so I'll cover that in another episode. I'm going to see if I can repair that. Next we have a couple of white plugs, and these are the only 20 amp 110 volt plugs in the shop. There's very few things that I need 20 amps for, but it's really easy to put them in now, so I decided to put a pair of them in. After that, on our next circuit is a set of 5 plugs, and they are all along this one wall. This area here has an extra plug because this is going to be where the tool cabinet's going to slide over to, and I will probably set up my laptop there and maybe a couple extra charging things. The next circuit we have is run down at the 18-inch level, and that's for 2 reasons. The first reason is that anytime I could avoid putting extra electrical around bench height, I thought that was a win, just to help with clutter. I like the idea of having a clear bench space in the back without anything else going through there. The primary purpose of this circuit is to run the air compressor. It has a pretty high startup load, and I think it draws 12 amps or 13 amps while running. And then we have another plug accessible either for on the wall or for the bench. I'm not quite sure what's going to go over there at the moment, but I have to keep a little bit of space clear just so I'm not running into problems with the bench. And I thought an extra plug at that side would be helpful. Coming over on the same circuit, we have our backroom lights. We have two of these in place. These are the General Electric light sticks. They are 1600 lumens each. One on each side of our storage area. And they seem to be providing a very good light. And one of the things that I really like about these light sticks is that they have a very well-rounded or omnidirectional light pattern. So unlike some cheaper LED bulbs where they put the majority of the LEDs on the bottom face or a band around the middle, these seem to disperse the light very well, and that reduces the number of shadows and makes it a lot easier to read labels and find stuff in the back room. And finally, from the back room, the last thing on this circuit is the fan. The fan is only a 1/4 horsepower fan, so it doesn't draw too much, and I don't think there should be any issues with it running at the same time as the compressor. The electrical is kept high and clear in this area because this is going to be future lumber storage. This timer is what controls the fan, and it's rated for a 3/4 horsepower motor. I've used this specific one for a number of years in my cabinet shop. It came out of there, and it's still going strong. I really like being able to have the 10 and 20 minute options. Sometimes if you want to leave the area for a bit and you just want to keep exhausting any fumes or dust, it's nice to just have that and it'll shut off. I had to use a 4-inch box when mounting this motor timer because it was so deep. There was no room for any morettes or anything behind it. If you do decide to put one of these in and you use a 2-inch box, make sure that the box is extra deep, or just check the clearance behind the motor timer. Make sure that you have enough room for your morettes in the back. Our next circuit feeds the air conditioner and our work light and miscellaneous other things on this side, all of which are lower power draw. We have a plug tucked up here out of the way and another one in there, and then we have 3 over in this corner. On this plug I have a surge protector, and that is mainly just to protect the electronics within the pellet stove. The manufacturer recommends it, and it's probably a good idea. Being out in the country here, our power is a little bit more iffy. And the last thing on this circuit is our vacuum switch. The vacuum switch here is manually operated. I'm fine with that. I decided to do it this way simply because of cost savings. To make this switch box, we took a 4-inch box and a standard switch and wired it into the plug. So this plug's operated off of this switch. And that gives us easy access to turning the vacuum on and off. And this particular vacuum is dedicated just to the bandsaw. The reason that I went with this is because it is a little more expensive in order to purchase a switch system that automatically turns on when a 220 volt 3 horsepower motor is switched on. In the case of the miter saw, it falls within a standard 15 amp circuit, and the IVAC has no problems with that. But you need to get into a contactor / relay system when you're going to start dealing with 220 volts or higher wattage applications. I had an IVAC switch system set up in my cabinet shop that ran a 220 volt load, and when everything was said and done, after buying the contactor and the extra box and whatnot, it was about $200 or so in order to put that together. This, on the other hand, is approximately $20, and it does everything I needed to do. I decided to not split this outlet and keep both of these switched because I'm probably going to put a second work light for the bandsaw off of this other plug, so that when I turn the vacuum on, I get an extra light. Right now the bandsaw has a light built into it, but a little more light would be good sometimes. And lastly, our final circuit in the shop is for our bandsaw. This is a 15 amp 220 volt circuit, and it is dedicated to the bandsaw. The bandsaw runs on a 3 horsepower motor that draws 13 amps, and the manufacturer states that a 15 amp breaker and circuit is ample for our needs. When I was wiring the bandsaw up, I had a couple options as to how I could do it. I could either hardwire it in, or I could add a plug to it. I decided to go with a plug for a couple reasons. The first being I really like the added safety of being able to unplug the device if I need to work on it. And the second being that I wanted to have a common 220 volt plug in the shop. If I want to be able to run something like my TIG welder, for example, it's an inverter machine, so it doesn't take much power, and I might need to make some modifications to the steel window frames, for example. This way I'm set up to go. So I chose a plug-in receptacle that's common with the welder that I have already. In this case, I believe it's a NEMA 650. Finn and I would like to say thanks very much for following along on this. Hopefully this is a pretty concise view of the electrical in the shop. And there are a couple other videos that go into more depth of some of the specific components and choices that we made. If you want to see those, I'll have those listed under my videos tab on this YouTube channel. So until next time, have a great day and go make some shaving somewhere. Yes. Yes. You smell pretty good too. You smell good for a puppy. Yes, you do.